My name is Janet Watts. I was born October 7th, 1938. I was born at my grandparents' farm just south of Rankin on Route 49. My mother had been a teacher. She taught in a little country school where all 8 grades were in one room. We lived in a farmhouse. There was no electricity, no indoor plumbing, and no central heat, and of course no air conditioning. So I remember as a kid in the wintertime, we slept upstairs and you could see your breath. It was cold up there. My mother would heat up an iron on the coals and wrap it in towels and put it at our feet so we were comfy cozy during the night. And we would get up in the morning, the stove would be on, the oven door was open, and we would be really warm on one side and cold on the other. My father provided for us by farming, milking cows, butchering, and my mother supported him. At harvest time, then they would get together and help each other farm. The women would provide snacks in the morning and in the afternoon, plus a big lunch at noon. We had these old phones on the wall. We had the party line, and you could contact your neighbor. Each one had their own code. It was like 2 longs and 3 shorts or something like that, so you would know that your neighbor was calling you. And you could also eavesdrop on others. When I was 6 years old, I remember my going to school, a little country school at Pellsville, and they're all 8 grades in one room. There was there were 2 in my class, myself and a little boy named Frank. I remember Frank because he pulled my hair. He wasn't there every year. I went to Pellsville until the middle of the 3rd grade, and then they closed the school, so we went to school in Rankin. I remember my teacher was Miss Farrell. I remember that we never learned to print. We learned cursive right off the bat. So when I moved in the 3rd grade to Rankin, they were just printing and just learning to write cursive. So that was kind of interesting. Somewhere in there, I can tell that I really like to read. And when I learned to read, I enjoyed reading the Bobbsey Twins. That was a series for young people, and I really enjoyed reading. And when we finally got TV, I enjoyed Western movies. I loved Roy Rogers and Dale Evans, Gene Autry, The Lone Ranger. I even belonged to the Roy Rogers fan club.
The Roy Rogers Show, starring Roy Rogers, King of the Cowboys, Trigger, his golden palomino, and Dale Evans, Queen of the West, with Pat Brady, his comical sidekick, and Roy's wonder dog, Bullet.
I was in the 3rd grade when we first moved to Rankin, or went to school in Rankin. And I can't remember when we were able to play a band instrument, but we got to play in the band, and I picked the clarinet and my sister picked the saxophone. And so we enjoyed playing. They had concerts and competitions, and I remember one particular concert, we were playing something about the big bad wolf, and it really loud, and my grandpa came to listen, and every time they came to that part, he would jump. As a young person, my sister and I both took piano lessons. Unfortunately, we didn't practice very well, so we didn't stick with it, which I was really sorry. And as I got older, I did take lessons, but I could never play anything really fast, or if there were too many sharps or something like that. But I did enjoy playing as I got older. A memory I have with my family was free movies, and they would set them up in town in Rankin, and you'd take your blanket and whatever and sit. Sometimes they would have cakewalks. For so much, you would go around this circle, and then, the music would stop and somebody got a cake. So one night I got 2 cakes. That's the only time I ever got anything. But I remember one day, we didn't think we were going to get to go to the free movies. So we got on our bikes and we were going to go anyway. So we got headed on down the road, and pretty soon my mother went around the section and she met us. We turned around and we pedaled home pretty fast. My sister and I, yeah. The year I was a freshman, there was a new high school built. We were the first freshman class. And at that time, the senior class got to initiate the freshman class. And so they would make up these things that you had to do or say. I still remember the verse that we had to say every time we met a senior. We had to kneel and say, "I am a little freshman, as green can be, the lowest form of animal on earth or sky or sea." And we had to give them some candy. But they had us the girls had to wear their skirts upside down, their shirts backward, shoes on the wrong feet, our hair different ways, and carried a bucket with our books in it. And then in the evening, they had a special ceremony. So for our class, we had to be blindfolded, and they led us up onto the stage where there was a semicircle of metal chairs, and we each had to sit half on one chair and half on another. And then they would ask for a volunteer, like they needed a volunteer to blow a feather across the gym floor. Well, the way you volunteered is they would shock you, and if you didn't jump up the first time, they would shock you a little harder the next time. I volunteered to blow the feather across the gym floor. Anyway, I think after a couple years, they got really carried away and they quit doing that. But in high school, our school was too small for football, but we had basketball and track and chorus, band, FHA, which is Future Homemakers of America. And so we took part in things like that. And PE, I remember girls basketball is so different than what it is now. The only thing I remember is that you didn't dribble the ball and you didn't run. So it was quite different. There was a bowling alley in town, and so part of our PE was bowling. And so we would go take our lunch at noon. Half of us would bowl and the other half would set the pins. So that was always fun. Then all the girls took home ec. So we learned cooking, sewing, canning, child development, all those different things. So I think my first sewing project, besides an apron, was a pair of pajamas, and I cut on the folded line. So they weren't quite as wide as they should have been. As a young teenager, things we liked to do, we had slumber parties with our friends. There was, they had movie theater in Hoopeston and Paxton. There was a skating rink in Paxton, so we had a lot of fun times. I think one 4th of July, my boyfriend's family were having a 4th of July party, and he had put all of his fireworks in a dresser drawer, and he carried his dresser drawer out, and so when they were lighting off the fireworks, sparks got down into the dresser drawer, and fireworks went off all at the same time, and everybody had to run for cover. So I don't think we saw too many of the fireworks. And of course his dresser drawer was destroyed. So I do remember my mother teaching us how to drive, and my uncle took me to get my driver's test. We had a flat tire on the way. I remember one time I was driving, and Mother was with me. We were in Paxton, and the cops were following me everywhere I went. And I thought, what am I doing wrong? So we pulled into where my aunt and uncle lived, and they stopped, and they gave me a good driving award. Made me nervous. They kept following me everywhere I went. So anyway, I passed my driver's test anyway. I had a job as a telephone operator for a very short time. And people would call in, and you would connect them by pushing this little thing in a hole. Well, when I was in high school, Rankin was a busy little community. It had a couple of restaurants, a couple of grocery stores, a hardware store, a feed store, a drugstore, post office, bank, and the bowling alley. So the drugstore was a place where kids liked to go because they had a couple of booths in there, and you could order a cherry Coke or a vanilla Coke or a Green River or things like that you don't get now. Paxton had Ripley's Drive-In. That's where I met Dave. It was a popular hangout for kids, and they would come to your window and get what you want. You give them your order, and they bring it. So that was a popular hangout for kids.
Do you remember what a meal cost? Like, would it be like a couple bucks or?
Well, I remember in Rankin you could get like a hamburger for $0.25 and fries for $0.10. I remember that at the restaurant in Rankin. Our senior class, I don't remember everything we did to earn money. We did have car washes and that, but we earned enough money to take a senior trip. Now, there were only 18 in our graduating class, and so we earned enough money to take the train to New York City and stayed in a hotel there, and we saw the Empire State Building, Radio City Music Hall. We weren't there very long, but it was kind of neat to be able to do that. I had decided, I guess, that I was going to be a nurse, and I had been accepted at Decatur to be a student nurse there, but I only went for 6 months and then I dropped out. I had met Dave that summer at Ripley's, and so anyway, I regret that to this day, that I dropped out of that, but I did. So in the meantime, I worked for a little while at a place called Bear Brand Hosiery, because at that time women wore hose and they had a seam up the back of the hose, and so at that place you sewed seams in the hose for women. And after that, I went to work at Chanute Air Force Base in an office there. In the summer of 1956, I met my husband Dave at Ripley's Drive-In here in Paxton. And I was with another fella. I got him a date with a girlfriend of mine, and I think our first date, maybe we went to a demolition derby or something. I mean, all together. But it wasn't long after that that Dave came out to the farm, and we started dating. He was, at the time, he worked with his dad in construction and built homes. And he was also a naval reservist. He joined the Navy as an 8-year obligator. And with that, if you signed up for 8 years, 2 years was supposed to be active duty. But he had been a reservist for 6 years, and then they passed a law that 8-year obligators didn't have to serve any active time. So he never served active time, except for 2 weeks out of every year he would go on a trip with the Navy. He was a flight engineer on a plane. So he Warren Pacey got him interested in the Navy. When I was 18 and Dave was 21, we were married at the Rankin Methodist Church on July the 28th, 1957. My pastor from the Methodist Church and his pastor at Westminster both officiated. We honeymooned at the Lake of the Ozarks, which was a place where his family always liked to go. And he had a little motor for a boat, and so we took that and stayed at a cabin at Branson, which at that time was a sleepy little town. And we were there for 2 weeks. And our first home was an apartment above what we called Doc Shine's house. I don't know what kind of a doctor he was, but he had an apartment upstairs, and it was where Dr. Hyman's office is now, is where that house was. And so we were there until he and his dad built a little 2-bedroom home on Maple Street, and we moved there. And Bill was born August the 26th, 1959. Lori Denise followed at March the 25th of 1962, and Chris April 25th, 1965. And our family was complete. What I remember most about being a new mom is the doctor told me we did not have to sterilize our bottles. And my mother-in-law just could not believe that. It was a new thing from their generation, but we didn't sterilize bottles then, so that made me kind of wonder, but we didn't sterilize the bottles. So, and we had cloth diapers, the stinky diaper pails, and that kind of thing. It's kind of scary bringing a new little one home when you haven't been a mother before, but it's a joy. I remember Lori especially until she was like 6 months old. She didn't want anything to do with anybody but me. So she was a little mama's girl. I remember Bill as a little one. He and the neighbor boy Mark, they found Halloween masks in the toy box, and they trick-or-treated the neighbor. It wasn't Halloween. Bill had amblyopia, which we discovered when he was 6, and we didn't know what it was, but where one eye is weaker, and if you don't catch it by the time they're 6, your one eye, they call it the lazy eye, you begin to lose sight because of lack of use. So he had to wear glasses. And I'm sure that that's what my sister and my mother both had, but nobody knew what it was. I remember my sister when she was in the 5th grade wearing glasses, and she had a patch over one eye, but she and mother both have had problems with their eyes that way. I'm not sure what year we actually moved here, but it was a good neighborhood with lots of kids for them to play with. So they had lots of friends growing up here. And as a family, we always like to take a vacation every year. The first few years we would go to Lake of the Ozarks. And one year I remember it was the 4th of July weekend. And they had a little enclosed fishing, and David got his license to fish, and the kids were young enough they didn't need. And Lori stubbed her toe, and I said, "Here, I'll hold your pole." She was old enough to go get a Band-Aid. And I had no intention of fishing, but the conservation officer walked in and I had a fishing pole in my hand, and I didn't have a license, and I didn't catch any fish, but Dave showed him his license, and he said we were in trouble anyway because I didn't have one. And I got a ticket. It cost $25, and we had to drive 25 miles to Camdenton on the 4th of July and go in the back door to pay a fine. However, the people that owned that place said they had owned it for 4 years and never seen a conservation officer. But their neighbor lady was out in a boat fishing, and she saw the conservation officer coming, so she threw her pole in and it floated, and it cost her $50 and carted her off in the boat. So that was one of our experiences that way. Otherwise, we ended up, some years we would go to Florida, to the beach and Disney, and have fun there. And sometimes we would go to Colorado, to Estes Park, and the mountains and hiking. And one time we rode horseback to a chuck wagon dinner, just a mile or so. So those were fun trips that we took. We had Mariana here from Argentina one year, and she and Chris and us went to the Smoky Mountains, and we were driving through, and somebody threw a bottle and hit the mirror on the side of our van, and the rubber from that around that mirror ended up around Dave's neck, and we had glass all through the van. And he ended up, it was just a 2-lane, no place to turn around or anything. So anyway, Dave ended up driving himself to Merrillville, to the emergency room. And that doctor was so mad because he said that was local sport for some of the kids there, and they would throw beer bottles. And he said the last person he treated had lost an eye. So anyway, we were thankful that, we didn't have anything more serious. And I don't think we ever got a bill from that hospital. But other than that, it was a good trip. Dave worked with his dad building houses until his dad's health wasn't good, and then Dave went to work at Chanute, and he worked at Chanute until it closed. He had a lot of hobbies. He enjoyed, when Bill had one of his friends, I forget how old he was, one of his friends gave him a little fish tank for his birthday, and Dave got so interested in that fish tank. He was reading everything about it. He ended up building 2 50-gallon fish tanks, and he filled one with tetras and the other with angelfish. And then he made his own brine shrimp to feed them, and he enjoyed that. I do remember one time he had the weekend at Glenview it was his Navy weekend. He had to go once a month, and the pump stopped, and I had to figure out, I think I stayed up until 4 o'clock in the morning reading the book on how to get that fish tank pump going again. I got it figured out, but it was hard for me. Anyway, he had the fish. He bought a printing press, cleaned it up, restored it, and he printed things for missionaries and other people too. He did a lot of printing in the basement. And another hobby was stained glass. He made a lot of beautiful windows and lamps. He built a quarter-scale tractor that worked, sold it. He just had a lot of hobbies, and he said he could fix anything except a broken heart or the break of day. So my hobbies were sewing, quilting, cooking, baking, that type of thing. So Dave has his own special cooking abilities. He could cook on the grill, or he could open a can of soup or fix a hot dog or grilled cheese. Those were his specialties. If I wasn't home at lunch, that's what he would have. So Dave got sick. He had some complaints, and the doctor told him, oh, there's nothing there to hurt, until it was too late. And he had advanced cancer of the kidney, and passed away in 1996. So he passed away in his chair, and I know your dad was here, and he said it was like somebody tapped him on the shoulder. He turned his head, was kind of a, like they came for him. I did continue to work until, well, maybe a few more months, and then CIPS was taken over by Ameren, another company, and they offered, older people a retirement package, which I took. And so I retired from there in '97. Our children grew up. There were marriages and some divorces and grandbabies and great-grandbabies, and I love them all. It's fun to watch them grow and mature and see them get married and have children, so. A favorite thing for me, and something that was always important to me, was to have the family over on Sundays and fix dinner and spend time together. It was always important to me. I remember doing that with my grandparents. We would go to my mother's family, usually on Sundays, and spend time with them and our cousins and aunts and uncles, and so I've always enjoyed doing that. Okay, I think my signature dishes for my family that I've made the most is probably ham, cheese potatoes, green beans, strawberry jello. I think that is probably one I've made the most. Apple pie for dessert. Okay, we had a family grace. This is passed on through Dave's family. Dear Lord, for thy loving care and food, we thank thee ever. Make us good and keep us always in thy grace until we meet thee face to face. Okay, that is the sick. But now Bill gets to say the prayer before meals.
Are you proud of him?
Yeah. Yeah. Proud of all my kids and grandkids and great-grandkids. Love them all. I think I have to say that as I look back on my life, I have a lot of regrets, but I have some things that I'm feel very good about too. I think if I had any advice for young people, I think it's very important to communicate, to keep the communication lines open. And I've heard it said, don't go to bed angry, and give people the benefit of the doubt. Sometimes we like to project what we think is true when it's really not, So it's important to give people the benefit of the doubt. But I think the most important thing, as I look back, I think I wish I had taken it more seriously, but I think it's important to develop a relationship with God. He's our creator. He has a plan for each of us, and I think it's so important that we do develop a relationship with Him, and He's the one that tells us, in the Bible, how we ought to live and for our own good. I think it's important to teach our little kids that God loves them and has a plan for their life. If you could learn that while you're young, that I think is the most important thing. really. My name is Janet Lucille Swanson Watts. I'm 84, soon 85. I live at 1011 Park Terrace, Paxton, Illinois, and today is July the 9th, 2023.